Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ChMC Masterclass digital event. My name is Natasha and I'm an events delivery coordinator at the CMI. And I'll shortly be handing over to David to begin today's event. If you have any questions during the event, you can ask them using the live chat box to the right of your screen, and we shall answer as many as we can during the Q&A. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared with you later today for those who book to attend. The event recording will also be available on the CMI website and the CMI YouTube channel. Now over to David, ChMC Assessment Manager at CMI, to begin this event.
Brilliant, thanks Natasha, and welcome everybody. I hope you're all well wherever you are in the world today. What I want to do today is to talk about Chartered Management Consultant from a couple of perspectives. I want to talk about why we have Chartered Management Consultant and what it means to the industry. And then I want to talk about what it means going through the assessment process and what the assessment process involves and how you can prepare for that assessment process to take place. So I guess the first question then really is why Chartered Management Consultant? Well, the Chartered Management Consultant came about as part of a review of consultancy and looking at the challenges that were involved in the industry. The idea came about really to harmonise some of the inconsistencies of professional standards across management consulting. It was an idea to give people a kite mark, if you like, a quality mark, so that when you were pitching for work, clients could see that you had achieved this quality mark, and it wasn't just a matter of, race to the bottom in terms of the cheapest, or in terms of that halo effect of, I always deal with this company, they're the best company, aren't they? Well, how do we get smaller companies and independent consultancy firms into that mix? And so one of the ways that we did was looked at this and say, well, okay, let's come up with a quality kite mark. Now, we didn't come up with this on our own. We came up with this in conjunction with other people. This is not CMI just sitting in an ivory tower saying, this is what's needed, let's design this. This was done with a number of the large consultancy firms and with the MCA as well. So it's a joint approach to this. It enables clients to make better informed decisions when they're buying, as I say, on quality rather than just price. But it's also a way of attracting and maintaining and retaining the best talent possible in the marketplace. If you're offering people an opportunity to go for this status, and it is a status rather than a qualification, I want to make that clear. This isn't a qualification, it's not academic, this is a professional status, and I'll talk about that a bit more as we go through this. And if you're able to offer that as a firm to your consultants, it's a way of retaining staff as well. So there's a win-win for everybody here. So what does it mean when we're talking about all this? What is a Chartered Management Consultant? Well, CMI were awarded the ability to become the awarding body by the Privy Council, and we are the only ones that can accredit you with this status. As I say, it was developed in conjunction with the MCA and a number of the high-level firms as well, some of the larger firms in the environment that we worked with to develop this. This has been developed and designed by the industry, by your industry that you work in, and it's developed to align to the industry framework as well, and what was looked at as what competencies are required. It's about value adding. It's an opportunity for you to take a period of self-reflection, have a look at where you've come from, have a look at where you still need to go, have a look at where you are at the moment and how you've made that journey, and reflect that back to us in line with the competency framework. It's based on real life experience. This is not academic. This is about real life practice and real life experience, where you've made a difference, what that difference was, how you've improved things for clients. And one of our major clients that's now looking at this is the Cabinet Office, and we've got Cabinet Office representatives sitting on the oversight board. And the general thinking is that once this gets adopted fully by the Cabinet Office, this will be a major key to open the door into government contracts when we're thinking about consulting. It's a really positive thing to be involved in. Some of the firms that I've been talking about that are already involved are on here. I'm not going to read these all out to you. I'll let you have a look at this for a moment. But as you can see, there are some very, very large firms on there and some very large organizations that are involved with this already. And firms that we're currently engaged with and engaging to come on board as well. There's a whole load more people there. So already, we've been going a little under 2 years, and already the momentum is gathering, and this is moving on at a pace now. We have over 500 people already who have been awarded the status of ChMC, and that is starting to build momentum as we go, and that will only grow more rapidly. So if you are thinking about getting a submission in, I would think about it sooner rather than later if I were you. The benefit of doing that is that the time between submitting and being awarded the status, if you're successful, will be shorter the sooner that you do it. So we don't just take our word for this. We have asked other people what they think. We've asked people that have gone through the process. We've asked some of the firms from where they originate from, what they think of the process. And we've got some really, really good feedback on our evaluations. 100% of people said it allowed me to reflect on my career journey. And this is a really important one. You may think, well, he's bound to pick that one because it's 100%, but actually this is a really important one, because how often do we get the opportunity to sit down and say, yeah, actually, how have I got where I am? How good am I? And what's that journey I've taken? What are the things that I've done really well? What are the things that I wouldn't do again? What are those experiences that I only share with people late night in the pub at the end of a conference when I'm confident enough that nobody is really listening? What are those experiences that I stand up in public and stand up on that stage at the conference and say, this is what I did, this is the difference it made, this is how it was received by the client? So we don't often get that, because we're dashing from one job to the next, from one client to the next, and we can be on this hamster wheel if we're not careful. So one of the real benefits of going through anything like this is that opportunity to reflect. It's also about recognizing your track record in management consulting as well. And 100% of people said that all the people we asked, 100% of them said that it gave them opportunity to do that as well. It does demonstrate integrity and commitment to ethics, and ethics is a very big part of the process when we go through that. So be prepared to be challenged on your ethical basis. In terms of the impact of becoming a ChMC, now you may think these numbers are lower, but given where we are in the process, we're really happy with these. 85% of those people asked said it increased their self-awareness. The same number said it increased their self-confidence. And 60% said it enhanced the impact they have with clients. Now, you may think that 60% is quite a low number, but actually, given that this is a new product and this is a new status that we're talking about, we're really pleased with that, because that's the message is getting out there, the word is getting out there, the recognition is getting out there. And really importantly, 77 is a score on our Net Promoter score, which, if you're not familiar with those, is, would I recommend this to friends and family? Has this made a difference? All those kinds of questions. So this is being seen as a really positive thing in the industry. So we'll talk about that. Now we think about, how do we get to this? Okay, so we're interested in this now. How do we get to start the process? Well, there are a number of routes that you can take to get to the assessment process. The two main ones are 5 years experience if you've got a professional consulting qualification, or you have come through an in-house accredited program, and it has to be accredited by CMI. If you've come through an in-house accredited training program and you've got 5 years experience working in management consultancy, then you can go through the on-program route. If you've got 7 years plus experience working as a management consultant, and I stress that because it's not about being a manager or a leader, it's actually being a management consultant, then you can come through what's known as the experienced professional route. Now, the difference in those two things is that if you come on program route, then we ask you for a bit more evidence in the submission, in the written submission, to allow for the fact that you maybe don't have as much experience. The status links to other professional statuses. It links to our own chartered manager status, but chartered manager does not get you chartered management consultant, or vice versa. They're two different things. One is looking at management leadership, one is looking at management consultancy. It links to the certified management consultant qualification, but again, that itself doesn't give you chartered management consultant status. You would still need to go through the process to become assessed to be a chartered management consultant. And again, membership alone of a recognised body like the MCA, CMI or the IC doesn't give you that status automatically. You still have to go through the process and demonstrate that you are a chartered management consultant and you meet the chartered competencies. Now, there's a very good reason for that, because this is about real life experience, real life demonstration of how you've made a difference, where you've made that difference and what that difference was. This isn't an academic status. This isn't a status you just pay the money and you become the status holder. We don't grandfather people in. We don't slip people in because of their hierarchy. This is all about you demonstrating how good you are, rather like taking a driving test. So, having said all that, let's look at how assessment works. The assessment journey has two parts to it. Once you're ready for assessment, you will enter your submission, and your submission is all done virtually online. It's all done with an online platform. Nothing is transmitted otherwise. The assessors don't download stuff. It's all looked at on the platform that we give you access to. Your submission will be reviewed by one of my expert assessors, and all the assessors have also been through the process themselves, and they are all chartered management consultants. So we did that on purpose because we think this needs credibility, and the people that are assessing you against the framework have also been through that framework and proved themselves to be competent and have been awarded the status. The second part of the assessment journey is a professional discussion, and again that's carried out virtually with you and the assessor, and occasionally we have other people observing that as well for quality purposes. Now, when you come to that stage, you are being observed. There's another observer. The observer is observing the assessor, not you. The only person that's making judgments on you is the assessor. Any evidence you submit has to be corroborated by a nominated sponsor, and that sponsor will be, if you're in a large firm, is likely to be from a firm. If you're an independent, it's likely to be from somewhere else, but that person has to be an appropriate person to sponsor you. You can't just get your mum or your sister or your friend down the pub, whatever it might be, to say, yeah, you're a great management consultant. That person needs to be an appropriate person. Lots of the applications are moderated. We have a moderation process that looks at the quality of the assessment, the fairness and equanimity of assessment as well, to make sure that everybody is treated equally. So again, that adds quality and robustness to the process. You will be informed of the outcome, whether you come from a firm or whether you're independent. It will be you that is informed of the outcome, and you do what you want with that outcome. Tell who you want. If it's not the result you want, again, that's up to you to let everybody know how that worked for you. And if you are successful, you can use the post-nominal letters, MCMI, member of the Chartered Management Institute, and ChMC, Chartered Management Consultant. And that's your badge of quality, if you like. So when we think about the competency framework, there are a number of areas on the competency. I apologize for my screen jumping about today. There are a number of areas on the competency framework that we look at. First of all, it's important to remember that we're assessing you and how you meet the competency framework. We're not assessing your training. We're not assessing your organization. We know what they do. We've accredited the training program already so that it meets the framework. We know what your organization do. We want to know about you. This is all about you. Now, for some people, that's really quite difficult because we're brought up in a culture where it's us, it's we, it's them, it's not me. I am part of a team. I am part of this. We are small cogs in a big machine. This is your opportunity to tell us how good you are. It's all about you, and you'll hear me talk about that more as we go through this morning. So we look at a number of areas. There's the values, ethics, and behaviors. And we will question you on values, ethics, and behaviors. You will be challenged to prove what you say on those things. Then we look at leadership and management. And this is your leadership and management within a management consulting environment, not leadership and management per se in a general term. And we look at your client operating environment, how you work with clients, how you find clients, how you fill that pipeline, the whole spectrum of dealing with clients. And then we look at professional and personal development. Now, this is really important because when you achieve the status, it marks a point in time, if you like. And then every 12 months, we will come to you and say, we want your CPD record, please. You said you were going to do this over the next 12 months. Have you done it? How did that work out? If you haven't done it, what's changed? What have you done instead? What are you planning to do for the next 12 months? So the CPD is very much looking forward and looking back. How did it go? What are you going to do next? And again, I believe that's an opportunity to stop, reflect. How have I improved over the last year? If I haven't, what do I need to do? What's happened? What stopped me from making those improvements I wanted to do? And again, we don't often get the chance to do that. So that's a really useful part of this whole process. Now, there are some guiding principles that I like to talk about when you're compiling your submission in the first place. There's a number of tools that we use, and my personal favorite is six serving men, Kipling's 6 serving men. So you think about what, why, when, how, where, and who. So what did I do? Why did I do it? When and how did I do it? Who did I do it for? But when you're thinking about who did I do it for, think about confidentiality. We don't want to know names. We don't want to know that you worked for Barclays for Mr. Jones. We don't want to know that you were on an assignment at Santander for Mr. Smith. We don't want to know that. And if we find that in a submission, we will send it back. We will hit a button that tells your legal department that you've broken the confidentiality rules, and your submission will be deleted from the system. So a lot of people say, okay, well, how do I do that? Well, what you do is you say, I worked in the finance industry. I worked in some other industry, banking or insurance or whatever it might be that you worked in. And I worked for a manager or a particular type of manager, but we don't want names. Now, the reason for that is twofold. One is confidentiality, and it's important that confidentiality is maintained. And second is it won't affect the assessment. We don't want that halo bias, if you like. The fact that you worked for Barclays or Santander or whoever it might be isn't going to improve your submission. That isn't going to give you a better score because you worked for a high-ranking client, you might say. That's not going to make any difference at all. We want to know what you did, where you did it, and who you did it for in terms of the environment, finance, insurance, logistics, construction, whatever it might be. So that's my personal favorite. A lot of other people will use the STAR technique. So what was the situation? What was the task? What action did you take? And what was the result? And you can use the chemistry one as well, method, conclusion, all of those things. Whatever works for you, but make sure that when you go through this, it's a structured, formal process that works for you, because that will give you the best chance of meeting all the evidence and showing how you meet all the evidence. We assess your evidence to make sure that it meets something that we call VAX. And VAX is valid. Is the evidence relate clearly to the competencies? We're not looking for filler here. There's a limited word count. We want the best evidence you've got that shows you in the best light possible. Is it authentic evidence? And you can only submit evidence that relates to you and your performance. And this is where you have to think about this. If you were in a team and the team did X, what was your part in that? We're not assessing the team, we're assessing you. Did you sit at the back on your hands and do nothing? Were you leading the team? Were you a key member of the team? Did you do a vital task within that team? You can talk about that stuff, but talk about how you had a role in that and what you did and what the outcome was based on your contribution to that process. Is it current? Is the evidence that you're supplying current? And current is really about knowledge that you're still using now. And I'll give you an example of this. My first degree was in IT. But I haven't worked in IT for so many years that actually going to a job and saying I've got a degree in IT is like somebody going to Formula One racing team and saying they worked on vintage cars. It's that kind of difference, really. And the other thing is that is there sufficient evidence? Is the evidence sufficient for the assessor to say yes? Now that might seem really simple, but there are a number of tricks involved in that for you to check. Now, we do this thing as humans where we think we see what we think we've written. Do your submission and get someone else to look at it, because it may not say everything you think it says. So you need to have enough evidence for my assessors to say, yeah, let's go on. There's enough in here in this written submission for me to warrant having a professional discussion with this person and taking it on to the next level. So we've talked about the two-stage process. So written submission, There's one template now, but many routes. If you are doing if you're coming through the on-program route, so you're 5 years plus, you would need to complete the whole template. If you are on the experienced route, so you're 7 years experience plus, there's a section that you don't need to complete, but it is all the same template. And you may have colleagues that have had different templates, but we've reduced it all down to one now. The second stage is the professional discussion, which I will talk about in a moment. And then the third part is the continuous professional development. So this ongoing look at, you said you were going to do this, what did you do? How did it work out for you? No idea what's going on with this. So the big question when you're compiling your written submission, why should I be awarded ChMC status? What is it about me, not my firm, not my team, my organization? What is it about me that means I should be awarded this ChMC status? Now, if you can't answer that question, you need to take more time before you put your submission. If you can't say to yourself, I've looked at the criteria, I've looked at the framework, I definitely meet this, and this is why I should be given this status. Not because I've been in this company 20 years, not because I've been doing this job for 25 years, not because I've got a BSc and an MBA or whatever it might be. What is it about you in relation to the ChMC status that means you should be awarded that status? So think about things like, what difference have I made? How have I made a difference? Where was that difference made? What were the measures of that? What difference did I make for who? And who agrees? Think about that nominated person who's going to sponsor you and say, yeah, David said he's done this and we've got a proof of it. The clients are happy and I'm happy. He did it to a particular level, did it to a particular quality, on price, on budget, on time, all of those things. So yeah, I agree. He deserves to go through this process. How he comes out of the process is down to the assessors, not to the sponsor, obviously. So people often say, when should I start gathering evidence? What's the process for that? How long is this going to take? And we'll talk to our guests today about that a bit more. But there's a process I like to talk about where we look at collect, select, connect, and reflect. If you're thinking about going through this process, start collecting evidence now. The sooner you start collecting evidence, the easier it will be. It's much easier to have a box with a load of evidence in, if you like, than have to trawl back through a load of stuff to find evidence that fits. Once you've collected all that evidence, select the best evidence, the evidence that best reflects you, your best you, connect it to the framework, and you have to connect it to the framework. You have to map it out in the submission and tell the assessor why it's in there. Put a piece of evidence in your submission. What framework criteria is it connecting to? It's not for assessors to go hunting and fishing. And if you don't do the mapping for them, they will send it back to you. And you only get 2 tries at this. So spend a bit of effort, spend a bit more time getting it right in the first place. Once you've connected it all, take a period of reflection. Have I written what I think I've written? Does it say what I think it says? Get somebody else to look at it and say, this makes sense or this makes no sense. Too much jargon. I don't understand what this is saying. This is disjointed, or this is a lovely story. This is fantastic. Brilliant. Get other people to help you on that as well as you go through the process. So we've talked about collecting, selecting, connecting, and reflecting. Really important to do that as soon as possible. Start that as soon as possible. So some main points from the written submission. It's all about you. It's about what difference you make. Why you? Why should you go through this status? Why should we consider you for this status? And that really is reflecting on the framework. Would someone who doesn't know you make sense of your evidence? Again, get them to look at it. It's about quality, not quantity. We're not looking for masses here. There's a limited word count. You need to get the best you can into this. And think about the written submission as your ticket to the dance. And the dance, if you like, is the professional discussion. Now, before we move on to the professional discussion, I mentioned you get 2 chances at this. You may get referred. Now, if you get referred, it's not all bad. It's not the end of the world just because we send your submission back and say we want more evidence. So there are times when you've put evidence in that doesn't quite meet the mark. It's not very clear evidence. You've not reviewed it. You've not got somebody else to look at it. You see what you think you've written. We look at it and we say, I just don't see how that ties up. There's just not enough of it in there. There's a bit, but you're not covering as much of the criteria as you say you're covering. So we will send it back to you and get you to submit more evidence. There are times when you miss evidence completely and there's a whole chunk that you haven't put in. So we will send it back and we will say, this bit's missing, we want some more evidence. It's not bad, it's your opportunity to polish it and make it shine. It's your opportunity to get it right, but you only get 2 goes at this. So if you do get referred, spend a bit of time, go over it. You get 14 days to resubmit. Spend a bit of time, go over it, get somebody else to look at it, get somebody else to look at it if you get a chance as well, because more eyes the better. Make sure it meets everything we've asked for and then send it back. That's the best way to get your ticket to the dance. But I will reiterate, if you get referred, don't panic. It's not the end of the world. So once you get through that process, we take you on to the professional discussion. And the professional discussion lasts around an hour, happens on the telephone or virtually, but then if we can't do it on video. We do like to see you. We do like to see, make sure that the person we are talking to is supposed to be the person we're talking to. So we will ask for photographic evidence. And we want to engage with you. You know, we can't do it in rooms because that's not cost effective, and not these days we can't do it anyway. But we want to see you, we want to engage with you, we want to see as much of the body language as we can, even though it's through a screen. It will last an hour or thereabouts. Sometimes they go a bit over. They'll expect to be at least 50 minutes. But sometimes they can go on to an hour and a quarter, an hour and 20 minutes. Now, either side of that hour mark isn't a measure of anything. If it's 50 minutes, 55 minutes is we've got everything we need to know and we're happy to let you go, or we've got everything we think we're going to get out of you. You know, you're not giving us any more, so we'll let you go. If it goes on to an hour and a quarter, hour and 20 minutes, it doesn't mean anything's wrong. It just means we're giving you a bit more chance to give everything that we need to get from you. Take this seriously though, and don't try and fix it in amongst other things. Don't think, oh, I've got an hour there, I'll fit it in there and arrange it for that time because I've got an hour between 2 and 3. Give yourself as much opportunity as you can. Treat this as a really serious pitch, because what you don't want to do is get to an hour and 10 minutes and say, I've got to go. We've had that happen, believe it or not, and it's not good, and you will fail. Let's be honest about that. So give yourself as much opportunity as you can. Treat it as a serious pitch. Allow plenty of time in your diary. The point of the professional discussion is to validate the submission. So we can all talk a good story, but can we walk a good story? You know, we've all seen CVs, haven't we, and application forms that say we're the best thing since sliced bread. And then you meet the person on the interview and you think, did you actually write this submission? Because this is not what I'm seeing. So it's about validating the evidence you've put in your submission and giving you an opportunity to bring that to life. Bring that, all the goodness out of that. Tell us all the stuff that we need to know. Make yourself the star of the show. We will discuss with you about ethics, and we will have a discussion about CPD and how your CPD has got you to where you are and what you're going to do in the next 12 months to take that forward. It is a real discussion. This is not an interview. It's not a question and answer. This is not an interrogation. As I said earlier, everybody that's involved in assessing has been through this process themselves. It's not academic. We're looking at fellow professionals having a conversation. It's not a test, but you can fail this. This is a pass or a fail. You only get one chance of this. You get 2 goes at your written submission, but 1 chance of this. And a real tip here is make sure you turn up. Now, what I mean by that is not physically. We've not had anybody not turn up physically yet, but you need to turn up mentally and mentally prepared for this. We are your client for that session. We're judging you as a client would judge you. So if you turn up and you're not really prepared and you're looking out the window and you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, I've got to get on with this. Can we get on? I've got another meeting at 10 o'clock, so let's crack on. If you turn up in that way, the likelihood is that you will fail, because you're not going to demonstrate what we're looking for in terms of quality and consistency. If you did that with a client that you were pitching for work for, what would happen? It's obvious what would happen, isn't it? And that's what's going to happen with us. This is real life. It's not academic. So make sure you give it enough time and make sure you turn up. It is all about you. It's I, captain, and me. What did I do? What did I do? Where did I do this? What did I do next? It was all about me. And think about that, because if you flip this around and we said, would you give yourself the status? Could you say yes? And if you could, why? And if you couldn't, why? If you were hearing about the team and we did this and we did that, and the team did this and the firm did that, you would say, well, what's my part in this? So think about that when you're talking. It's really difficult for some of us, but it's a real challenge and one that you need to get your head around before you come to the professional discussion. Think about the main show. Think about the ethical test. If my friends and family saw my performance today, what would they say? Would I be happy about that? If my performance at the professional discussion ended up on the front page of the local news, would I be happy about that? What's my gut feeling? Am I ready to do this? Should I put it off? Am I good to go? Have I left enough time? Am I coming to this to be the best that I can be now? Think about all those things and you'll do yourself the best service possible. Some things to think about, with all these kinds of assessments, there's all sorts of urban myths that go around. There's the one about the driving test, isn't there? You get a certain driving examiner, you're bound to fail. They fail everybody. We avoid all those myths. They're all myths. None of them are true. We are judging you on your performance on the day and in conjunction with your written submission. How do you meet the criteria? We don't care where you're from. We don't care what position you have in the organization. Do you meet the criteria or not? Now, the key thing about that is we want you to succeed. We're not going to waste your time and we're not going to waste our time. If we don't think you can do it at the professional discussion, you won't go to the professional discussion. We will fail you at written submission stage. So think about that as well. Think about, have I got enough information in my written submission to get me to the professional discussion? There are no trick questions in this. We're not looking to catch anybody out. There are nothing that we would discuss with you that isn't part of the framework. So, there's nothing going to surprise you. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing you wouldn't have prepared for as long as you've prepared fully. And we want to hear about how great you are and why we should give you the ChMC status. So some key thoughts for that: turn up mentally, turn up physically, obviously, but turn up mentally and turn up prepared. Take it seriously on the day. This is not a given. We are your main client for that session. Treat us like you would your main client for that session. It's not about hierarchy. It's all about the difference you've made, and it's all about you. What have you done? When did you do it? How did you do it? Not the team, not the organization. There's the key thing. Treat it as a real pitch, and you are the engagement. We're buying you. If we were buying anything, we would be buying you. So that's the presentation from me. Now we go back to the good bit and we can talk to our guest and we can take some questions from the floor. So I'm really pleased to be able to say I'm joined this morning by Ranjit Sidhu from ChangeQuest, an independent consultancy specializing in change and project management. And welcome, Ranjit. Good to see you. You're on mute, Ranjit.
That's a good start, isn't it? Good morning. Good to see you too.
Ranjit, you've been through the process yourself and were successful in going through that process. And really what I wanted to do today for the purpose of our audience was think about that process and how that worked out for you. And with that in mind, what would you say was the most challenging thing about the written submission, first of all?
It's the word count. It really is. Because you have all the components in the competency framework that you want to put evidence against, as you've said. That's the purpose of the assessment. So you want to gather the evidence. You go through your experience. Yeah, okay, I can tick that. I can tick this. I want to say this. I want to say that. And then you suddenly realize that you've got to do that in 1,250 words. So that's really then the challenge about how do you get the maximum value for those 1,250 words. And it's not just, the assignments that I delivered or led. It's more widely, how do you build your professional network, the personal development aspect? How do you demonstrate your ethics and values in your work? So there is a lot to fit in. But I would say the exercise of actually refining it, cutting out all the clutter, putting in there absolutely what was relevant in the most efficient way, that in itself is actually a really good exercise as well. So, but you can't do it in one sitting. I mean, I certainly found I was revisiting it. I did it in sort of iterations and kept thinking, how do I reduce this? And your tip earlier about get it reviewed. So I had my colleague in the like an independent fresh pair of eyes read through it as well.
I think that's a really good point, isn't it? The bit about not doing it in one sitting. I think if you try to do that, you're not going to give yourself the best opportunity. I make no. Often people say about the word count, it's quite tight, and it is quite tight. And I make no bones about that, because I think one of the key skills about communicating is the ABC, the accuracy, brevity, and clarity of communication, as we all know. And I think as well, if you're pitching for a client and the client says, I want 4 sides of A4 as to how you're going to deal with this problem, if you give them a whole book, you're not going to get very far, are you? We need to get our mindset around dealing with what clients want, as well as and reflecting that into this status. But as you say, it's not easy, is it? It's not.
And I mean, in work, to any good presentation, when it's good, or a report, you absolutely know when you've nailed it. It's because it is concise, it addresses the key points, nothing less, nothing more, and that's what the written submission is about, really.
There's a lovely quote from Einstein that I often think about that says, if you can't explain it simply, you don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's handy to remember.
Absolutely.
So with the written submission, one of the questions that we often hear is, how long does it take to do a written submission? Do you have a figure in mind from your experience of how many hours or how many days you think it might have taken?
The actual number of hours in total, I suppose, isn't that much. But it's over a period of time. So, for example, my first pass at it was just looking at the competency framework, all the components within, getting my head around that. And then, going through, so what are the assignments I've been doing more recently? What are the experiences? And literally just listing all the things that I could think of against the competencies. And then just leaving it. And then that would maybe about 3 hours or something the first time, then coming back to it about 2 days later, refining that further. So I would say probably about 3 to 4 chunks of about 3 hours in total.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got through that stage, and we've put the time in and got through all that, and got that written submission in, and it's been assessed, and it may have been referred, but you've got to the final stage, and the assessors finally said, yeah, okay, let's take you on to the professional discussion. And having gone through that process yourself, what would you say is the biggest challenge about the professional discussion itself?
That's a really interesting one, actually, because surprisingly, I didn't actually find the professional discussion a challenge. The written submission was almost more of a challenge. I was nervous beforehand. I really didn't know what to expect. And I hadn't seen any webinars like this. I didn't actually know that much about the process of the professional discussion. But the assessor that I got was absolutely brilliant, explained exactly what would happen, what the process was, really helped me to feel comfortable. And then it really was a discussion. And at first I was trying to work out in my head, oh, I know why you're asking me that question. That's against this competency bit in the framework, that sort of thing. But actually very soon, you just get into the flow. And you can't really tell, which bit it fits to. You just get into the flow, talking about yourself, taking the time out. So, and then before you know it, it's over. So I'm not really sure what was challenging about it, other than it was a bit nerve-wracking, and before.
Yeah.
But once you get into the flow and just go with it, it was fine.
Yeah, I think reflecting on my own journey through that process, I would kind of say the same. But then I often think, I wonder if that's the same for other people, because I could talk for Britain. So I think once you get into it and you realise that it is a conversation and not a grilling, I think it soon becomes a lot more comfortable, doesn't it? And you're really, you hit it spot on there when you say the time just goes. That hour goes before you know it's over, isn't it? It's bizarre.
And the other thing is actually it isn't just about the examples that you've given in the written submission. It can be anywhere. So in fact, part of the preparation, going back to the earlier written submission, there's lots of examples that you want to throw in, and then a lot of it is taken out, refined for the actual written submission. But hold on to, keep in mind all of those other examples that don't make it into the written report, because actually being able to just recall them easily through the discussion is helpful, because there's a chance that, other stuff will come up anyway, outside of what you put in the report.
I think that's a really good point, and it's helpful to remember, isn't it, that the word count is a written word count, not a spoken word count. You can say as much as you want in the professional discussion. One of the things that I often think about in terms of my own career, and I'd be interested in your view on this as well. We can end up, we start off very broad, don't we? And we want to touch everything in the environment that we're working in, and we want to be part of that whole process. But very quickly, and as the years pass, and my God, don't they pass quickly? But as the years pass, we end up, or we can find ourselves funneled in a particular niche. I know I did. My own specialist area is change and people and training, really. And I guess one of the things that is important to think about when you're going through the process is, how do you make sure that you present yourself as a broader practitioner rather than being stuck in that niche? What was your take on that?
Sure. I think just being really systematic, with it. So go through every single line in that competency framework, because really I think we tend to recall more easily, the things that are the most recent. So the most recent assignment. And also I think there's an element of, there is some stuff that we just do naturally. Like the things like around showing empathy, or that having ethics and values that you follow. I mean, that's such a no-brainer. It's like, why would you even talk about it? It's a given. It's just who I am. It doesn't actually, it might not occur to you that it's a thing, that you need to pull out and actually show some evidence. So I would say, just be really systematic about that bit. Have you got an example or evidence against each line? Now, there may be some things that, that actually don't come to mind straight away, or you think, well, I've been for a long time focusing on, say, the more strategic aspect, not so much the operational delivery, and then being able to show the measures against that, the actual measures and benefits realized from that. So it may be that, you're pulling out different examples, and some of those examples might be a bit further away where it was more operational delivery focused. Or it may be that actually with what you've been doing, there hasn't been as much opportunity around developing client proposals and business development around that. And really think about, so even if you haven't had that in your role, could you reflect on that, think about it, go have a coffee and, a meeting with somebody where you can say, look, these are my thoughts on, this is what's been happening in the industry. I really believe that this could be turned into a proposal, something. Yeah. And if you genuinely just haven't got that experience, think about what else you need to do to build that experience before completing the assessment, I think. For me, just really being systematic and pulling out examples, because sometimes it's just there that you've forgotten about it. It's not at the front of your mind.
Brilliant advice. Thank you. And I think the final thing I wanted to talk about really was, I've been talking for half an hour doing a presentation about the process and about what it's all about. But from your point of view, somebody who's recently been through it, if there was one piece of advice you would give about the assessment process, what do you think it would be?
I think you've touched on it already, actually, in your presentation around taking it seriously, the preparation element, and being outcome focused. I think, the written submission isn't the thing that needs to get you the actual final award. I think you call it getting the ticket to the dance. Yeah. You just need to do enough in that to get the outcome of being invited to the professional discussion. And so I think it's that, really think about the process, really think about how best you can prepare for it, and go for it wholeheartedly.
Brilliant. Thank you. Brilliant advice. Thank you. Thank you, Angie. I think if we go back to Natasha now, we may have some questions from the floor.
We do, yes. So our very first question comes from Serena, who's asked, when should we be getting started on the actual report writing as part of the process?
Angie, do you want to pick up on that? Someone who's recently been through it.
I think there's two aspects to that. There's the evidence gathering, let's call it that. Thinking about the evidence against the components in the framework. I mean, that really, I think, can happen immediately, to start collecting the evidence against that. Whether that's, you might not put that into the final report, the refining bit, but it's that collecting, selecting, connecting it to the components in the framework. Really just reflecting on, is that the most appropriate, relevant piece? So that process that David talked about really, I think, can start immediately.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, because wouldn't I? Because I said it in my presentation. But I think it's really important to start as soon as possible. Don't leave it till and then have to troll back through stuff. Start gathering it as soon as possible. Even if you're say at year 3 or year 4 in the process, so you've got another couple of years to go before you can apply. Start collecting it now. You can always take it out much easier than you can put it back in.
Yeah. That's great, thank you. And I was in the chat today, so my question was, what did you find to be the most valuable part of the entire process?
Do you want to go first, or shall I?
I don't mind, actually. Why don't you go first, David? Yeah.
I think I've hinted at this already, being able to speak for Britain, but for me, when I went through the process, the most valuable part was having that professional conversation. I think any written submission can feel a bit like a test. It can feel a bit dry. And I think having the opportunity to bring my submission to life and add to it and really make it shine, I think was the professional discussion, and I felt that was a real useful thing to do. I hadn't done it since I'd been through a Viva years ago, which was a bit more of a challenge, I have to say. But that was for me, that was the best part of the process.
Yeah. I just think all of it was valuable. That's why I was like, oh, which bit? Well, I think all of it is. I think the thinking about what does it mean to be a professional? I think especially in an area like consultancy, because let's face it, I think sometimes it's had a bit of a bad rap, so really thinking about what does it mean to be a professional and recognised professionally, and thinking about all the different components, connecting what it is that you've done, your experience, to that sort of mapping process, actually, I think I found really valuable. And thinking about it in those broad terms. And I think because there is the CPD component as well, it isn't just a one-off exercise.
No.
I think this is really just an ongoing journey as well. So, it's just a journey that we're on. And that sort of lifelong learning aspect is going to be there for it. So that in itself is valuable. It's like you get on a journey and you're part of that and you're continuing to develop that, is how I see it.
That's great, thank you. And our final question from Jessica is, do you think it's possible to go for the ChMC if you've only provided internal consultancy as part of your job? Probably one for David.
Yes, it is. It is possible. It doesn't have to be external consultancy, but you have to ask yourself, am I an internal consultant or am I a project manager? And that's a really, really important question, because we have a number of people that come through the process from that route who turn out to be project managers, not internal consultants. So you have to look at the framework, look at the competencies, and decide if you can prove evidence against all of those competencies. One of the big challenges with internal consultancy is, here's a piece of work, here's a client, go off and do it. Well, how do you, as a management consultant, get clients? How do you build your network? How do you keep that pipeline going? What are all the issues around that you need to deal with, rather than just being dropped into something and say, here, you're the consultant for this piece of work, go off and do it. Because if that's happening, you're more likely to fall into the category of project manager, however good a project manager you are, rather than a consultant. So have a look at the framework. If you meet the framework and you can prove that you meet the framework, then being internal isn't going to be a problem.
That's great. And we've actually had another question just sneak in there. So do periods of work inside or where you've taken a temporary role with the client count towards ChMC when pulling together evidence?
Yes.
That's great. That's a nice, easy answer. So that's actually all of the questions we've had today. So if you do have any questions, feel free to contact the ChMC team at chmc@managers.org.uk. But first of all, thank you to everyone who joined us, and thank you, David, and our special guest, Ranjit, for your insights and expertise, and thank you for taking our questions today. For any additional information and guidance, please contact either your firm's ChMC program manager or a member of the ChMC team. They're very happy to help. A recording of the webinar will be made available to all those who've registered to attend for the event. We'll also be sharing these slides later today as well. Use the link in the live chat to book onto the next session, taking place on Monday, the 15th of November. And please take a few minutes just to let us know your thoughts on today's event by completing our evaluation form. The link is also in the live chat. So thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Natasha. Thanks, everyone.